Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations to the class of 2020. We are so excited to welcome you to the USC Alumni Association. We have a wonderful panel to share with you today of some great alumni leaders who are going to share their experiences about how they got involved with the Trojan Family, and especially how to stay connected to the Trojan Family and tap into the Trojan Network. One of the things that I just wanted to do was share some reminders for how this meeting will be managed today for a prime optimal viewing experience. And with that, here are some reminders. For this meeting, please remember that you have been muted by the host and to keep your microphones muted to just minimize some feedback that we may get. Second, please remember to select speaker views so that when each of our panelists are speaking, you can go ahead and see their wonderful faces. And lastly, please use the chat feature to ask any questions during the panel. With that, we will be using that to kind of monitor your questions and field them to our wonderful panelists. So now I would like to kick it off to our great moderator, the Associate Senior Vice President of the USC Alumni Association, Patrick Auerbach.
Thank you, Ashley, and good afternoon, class of 2020. I echo Ashley's warm congratulations on almost being at the completion of your USC degrees. And I want to start off, first of all, by saying that our hearts are with you. We are all going through this very unique time in our lives. None of us, even those of us who are many years out of school, even our parents and grandparents, for a lot of us, have never seen anything like this. So we obviously are all going through it, but to all of you, our hearts go out to you. What we want to do here today is provide you the best possible experience we can in a virtual space of what we typically do as a send-off, so that we could welcome you into the Alumni Association, provide some information to you about what to expect in terms of, once your degree is conferred and what that process looks like. In terms of becoming a member of the Alumni Association, which, by the way, is automatic and free. Once your degree is confirmed by the registrar's office, then you're automatically a member. Guess what? You get to keep your email address. It does become alumni.usc.edu through a lifelong Gmail account. So it will transfer over, and there's information that we will send to you as to how to make that happen. When you become a member of the Alumni Association, there's countless benefits that are afforded to you. And then, of course, a lot of what we're going to cover on the call today is how you can stay connected to the Trojan family through various alumni communities all over the world. Social media, there's all kinds of social media tags that you could use to stay connected, and we ask you to do that. Hopefully that'll be a fun experience for you. So just want to again remind everybody that your membership in the Alumni Association, is automatic. You will be getting an alumni card actually in the physical mail once we get back to campus, because our mail services are obviously not running as normal right now. As mentioned just now, your student email will go away after 6 months, and then you'll get your alumni card in the mail. And we ask all of you, the best way you can stay connected with us is to be sure to update your contact information. There's a special alumni portal. It's called Fight Online. It actually has been called Fight Online for many years. Even though I know Fight Online suddenly taking on a new meaning because, like with Dr. Fulton, a lot of folks, because we're all online. Fight Online is actually the official alumni portal, and it's a great way for you to stay connected, so we ask you to do that. And without any further ado, I'm now proud to introduce our panelists to you today for the 2020 graduation send-off. We have 3 wonderful engaged Trojans who are going to impart hopefully some great wisdom and knowledge, and are also here to answer your questions. So I know that Ashley mentioned at the top of the hour, we want to encourage everybody to have this be an interactive dialogue today. So without any further ado, I'm now going to introduce our panelists. We have with us today Heather Rim, David Moreno, and Mark Panamera. So I'm going to start with David and ask him to do a brief introduction of himself. David.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everyone. My name is David Moreno. I graduated class of 2016 with a degree in political science from USC Dornsife. I'm originally from a small town called Escondido, California in North San Diego County, and I currently work in the public relations community engagement field as a senior account manager for a small firm in Burbank called Consensus Inc.
Thank you very much, David. Heather.
Hi, everyone, and congratulations. I'm Heather Rim. I am a native Angelino, third generation, and proud of it. Graduated with a master's degree from USC in 2003 from the Annenberg School of Communication. I am, my biggest job is I'm a mom of two and enjoying homeschooling right now. So forgive any interruptions of small people barging into this video conference in advance, but I'm happy to be here and answer any questions you all have. My day job is Chief Marketing Officer for AECOM, which is one of the world's largest infrastructure firms, and I'm based in Century City.
And Heather, where did you do your undergrad?
Azusa Pacific University.
Okay, do you like USC better?
I mean, is there, I of course.
Just checking. Okay, so yes, well, I know we have many of our graduating students on this in this meeting right now are folks who are like you, who maybe did their undergrad at another institution, but then came to USC and kind of like me, saw the light, because I also did not do my undergrad at USC. I kind of did it 12 miles west of here, and we will not talk about that anymore, but I am a Trojan for life. All right, let's go on to Mark Panamera. Mark, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Mark is a wonderful Trojan who's been doing a lot for the Trojan family.
Having a look. There we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome and congratulations. Mark Tanimura, graduate 1984 from the Marshall School of Business. I am a third generation partner in the family produce distribution business based here in Los Angeles. And I'm proud to serve on the USC Alumni Association Board of Governors, as well as the Athletics Department Board of Counselors. So welcome. I look forward to talking with you today.
Thank you very much. As you can hear, we have I hear a lot of laughter. Do people hear laughter? Okay. We have a very diverse panel here right now of three panelists. We have Forsyth, we have Annenberg, and we have Marshall, and many very varied careers here. So I'd like to now start with the first question to each of our panelists. And whoever wants to start can start. Talk about really briefly, like your favorite memory as a student at USC. Like what sticks with you today when someone says, what was your like most, you know, your crystal clear, your most like magical memory of being a student at SC? What was it? Who wants to start? I'm going to call on you like you're still in college if you don't answer.
I'm happy to start, Patrick.
Thanks, Heather.
You know, for me, being admitted to USC was very exciting. The director of the comm management program reminds me that she says that I had to fly all the way to New York to learn about USC. I was at an International Association of Business Communicators conference in New York, and there was a USC booth there. And I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Rebecca Weintraub, and I was just so thrilled to be admitted to the program. Had always loved USC growing up here in LA. And so I think that was my favorite moment. But I will also say, I think for me, my probably most favorite moment has been being able to, every time I hire someone, every time I hire a graduate from USC, I just light up inside. So that I think is more where I find my favorite moments, seeing people join me on the other side of USC.
Excellent. Mark, what about you?
I think for me it was meeting the friendships that I formed and meeting certain people. Many that I'm still friends with today, and in fact, when I look back upon that time, there was one person that I became friends with, and we're still friends today. He was the best man in my wedding. I was the best man in his wedding, and I think that's one of the great things about the Trojan family is these long-lasting relationships that really start off on campus and continue afterwards. And it's that friendship's just been very meaningful and very, very so.
Thank you. David, what about you?
Yeah, so my first sort of introduction to USC in high school was a part of a college readiness program called Upward Bound. And so we actually, the whole Upward Bound program for SoCal, they had a leadership conference, a student leadership conference, and USC hosted it in 2011, my junior year. And so that was sort of my first introduction to campus. I really enjoyed it. So then that's when I kind of, like marked off USC as like a school to apply to the next year. Because naturally, like a lot of, competitive USC people, you want to, apply to all of the competitive colleges, universities, get the prestigious universities checked off. And then once I got in, I came to an admitted student reception. I believe those are held in April, if I recall. Went to hear the professors speak, did like a housing tour. But something that really, grabbed me was I went to a Dornsife chat where they talked about how they really love that the students in Dornsife are always sort of interdisciplinary, and they kind of encourage that, or you could sort of like blend together different, study areas, different practices into one and sort of create and guide your own USC experience and your own academic career. And so then that kind of really grabbed me. And then, there's a tradition where, if we have the victory bell, the Trojan Knights, they have it right there in front of Tommy Trojan. And once if you decide like on the spot you want to go to USC, you can ring it out loud. And that signals to everyone, within earshot that you're going to USC. So I proudly rang the bell that day. And then I decided, all right, like I'm deciding to go here. And then just after USC, similar to my other two fellow panelists, it's sort of the USC connection, the Trojan family. Obviously we inundate everyone with the whole feeling of Trojan family, but we do so because it's true and it's real. All the connections you form with people are lifelong and worldwide, and we stay connected. And, my closest friends to this day are still the core group of people I met from my freshman year, all those many years ago.
Thank you all. That's great. So now we brought you back on, we brought you back to your days on campus as a student, but like all students, 99%, we have a great graduation rate. You graduate and you move on. So let's now move to what the transition was like from being a student. So you've gone through commencement and now you're like going out in the real world. So let's talk about that experience a little bit. Like, what do you recall as being like, what was that experience like for you? So let's start with you, Mark. Why don't you talk about your experience when you first graduated way back in 1984? A lot of our friends here maybe weren't yet. But why don't you talk about
for me, graduating, remained in contact with my friends because of the various classes and the various people that I've met, stayed on campus and stayed involved through athletics and attending games and so forth. Initially, when I graduated, I worked for the family business, but decided to leave and go on my own to see what I could do on my, challenge myself to see what I could do with my degree. And so went out and actually came back to campus and made use of the Career Services Center and set up some interviews that way, and actually did get some interviews and ultimately ended up getting a job through the service center there. So I think it just kind of signifies the importance that staying in touch with campus, even if you leave for work sometime, you can always come back. You're always going to be welcome back. And there's a lot of resources here that you can take advantage of regardless of your age that will help you.
Interesting. So you felt welcome right away. Didn't it feel weird to come back to campus? Like, I'm not a student anymore?
I never felt that way. I was, the people were very warm and welcome and very willing to help. I could talk to people, seek their advice. It was just like being a part of the family.
Very good. David, what about you? What about like, so, you're the youngest of the bunch there. You're closest to all of our friends here on the call, either by age or by experience of recently graduating. Talk about your experience. Was it perfect, or was it a little tricky, or were you unsure? Talk about that, please.
Yeah, so my experience, it's sort of like you mentioned, like a little bit in the middle of the road. I definitely wanted to stay connected to USC. That much I knew. Because I was involved in a variety of extracurriculars. One of them being sort of a Dornsife student ambassador. So I was kind of trained on how to like sell USC and be connected to USC. So I felt sort of like a great and proud obligation and duty to sort of like remain on campus, stay connected, go to events, but also just sort of realizing that even though I was leaving the university and I was going out into the real world, like USC's resources, they don't stop being available to you once you graduate. They're available to you as an alumnus. There's the Career Center, there's your professors, there's their staff, there's the Alumni Association. So I definitely made use of those resources, whether it was reaching out to professors in my department and asking them, do you know anyone in in the political science field that you could connect me with? I don't really know what I want to do for my career. Could you set up some informational interviews? And people were always more than happy to do so. I signed up on the career portal, And, you can, sort of set your preferences on what sort of jobs you're looking for, looking for the whole Trojans hiring Trojans network, staying connected that way. So it was definitely, it went off to sort of like a slow start because I didn't, I wasn't like a lot of my friends where, like people in Marshall, they always have like in the summer leading into your senior year, they may already have their offers for a job. But for me, I was like, even when I graduated, I first wanted to like take a break and go home with family. But then from there, I kind of tried to navigate and figure out what I wanted to do until I got to the company and the job that I'm in now.
So your professors called you back, even though you weren't a student anymore, like when you got in touch with them for help?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I always had my favorite professors, and I think I only had like the same 3 or 4 professors that I took classes with, because I just would take their other classes that fulfilled my other requirements, and I had good connections. Great.
Thank you. And so Heather, for you, as getting your master's degree, talk about that, because your time on campus was maybe not as long as the undergrad experience of 3 or 4 years. It was a couple of years. So talk about like your experience in finishing your degree and then resuming your life outside of college.
Sure.
What that transition was like.
Yeah, well, I feel like I've never left USC. When I was in the master's program, I was also working full time. And so I was working in healthcare at the time at WellPoint, which is now Anthem. I was fortunate enough that my employer really encouraged me to get my master's degree. And it was a wonderful kind of way to continue the trajectory of my career. And so I was able to drive from Thousand Oaks to USC at night, which was quite a trek. But there was a group of us that just became lifelong friends together. It was awesome because I was able to apply in real time what I was learning in the evenings on the job almost instantaneously the next day. My degree's in communication management, and I was a director of communication at the time. So it was fantastic. I think, after I graduated, I was in my role. The company I worked for, WellPoint, was acquired by Anthem shortly thereafter, and I found myself wondering, what am I going to do? The headquarters of the company was moving to Indianapolis, and the first person I called was Dr. Rebecca Weintraub at USC and said, can you help me think through this? And I think every move I've made, she has been there for me, along with so many other professors and colleagues and friends and coworkers who are part of the USC family. So for me, it's been a wonderful way to kind of have a sounding board, to have a partner, to have someone with you along the journey, no matter what. And I've found that in USC since I graduated. So.
Excellent. So I want to remind all of our attendees today, and thank you, we've got a great turnout today. If you have questions, please don't hesitate, per the instructions at the top of this meeting, to pose those questions, because we'd love to get into some dialogue. But now I want to take a little turn here, because again, 3 wonderful, great, active, happy, vibrant, employed alums right now. Has it all been rainbows and kittens and puppy dogs and, perfect cardinal and gold journey, or have there been some bumps in the road? Let's talk about a couple challenges you've had along the way, and how you've dealt with them, and if appropriate, I'm sure USC's been there, but and talk about how maybe USC's been a part of that solution for you. But why don't we talk about something that you've had to weather, and how you got through that, because I think that's really resonant and germane to our audience here today. So let's Heather, let's go back and start with you now. Mix it up a little bit.
Sure. So when I think about my career, and I really believe that this graduating class at USC will be known as the most resilient group of graduates, and that will be something that is going to benefit you for life. What you're going through is unprecedented, and as you navigate this, it's going to really be a wonderful way to demonstrate resilience in the midst of something that we've never seen before. So I applaud you, and I know that it's going to serve you well. It's one of the key attributes that I look for in people that I hire. And so I'm sure it feels awful. I know it feels awful in this moment, but it'll be something that I think people will look back on and say, wow, you navigated this and it's made you stronger. So, but I know that, again, doesn't help right now, given what you guys are going through. I would, it's interesting when I think about some of the most wacky experiences that I've had in my career. I was, this is before USC, but I had my heart set on being part of the .com movement. And I know for many of you, that's all you've ever known. But I remember when the internet became a thing, and I joined a group when I was at Countrywide Home Loans called the e-business division. And it was something, and you put an E in front of something and it made you cool and hip. And, we were all exploring what the internet could mean for our business. And it's hard to imagine a world without it, but I was part of that world. And so I just had my heart on being part of this movement. And I took a job with the .com, and my role required me to fly up to Redwood City every Monday, and I'd fly home every Wednesday. And I thought it was the most amazing thing ever. And then there was something called the .bomb, where basically so many of these companies, including the one that I worked for, quickly became a penny stock. All the resources that went away, my big fancy job, my ability to fly up every week, all kind of quickly in a 6-month period, just kind of did this little, kind of crash and burn. So I had to really take a moment there to think about what this meant for my career, and how I could leverage what I learned in this moment and apply it in a different type of environment, when in LA there weren't a lot of those similar opportunities available, or maybe they were also really risky, and so I needed a bit more stability in my life. So I guess all that to say, I as I've navigated my career, I've thought about what are the through lines and the things that I can take with me, and not being so set on, I had a dream that I was going to do this job and this is exactly what it was going to look like, but rather, this is the person I am. This is what I can bring to the table. This is the energy that I can bring to an employer, and the movement that I can create by being part of an organization. And that's kind of helped me weather, because I can imagine what you guys, so many of you, I'm sure, have had jobs lined up that have, maybe they're not playing out the way that you thought you would, or industries that you had your heart set on maybe aren't hiring in this moment. And so I would just encourage you to think about kind of your personal brand and how that can kind of carry you through to opportunities that might not necessarily be on the map that you've set out for yourself. If that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Heather. I certainly remember it was either the .bomb or the .com. So yeah, we saw the pendulum swing really rapidly, yeah. And I think we're seeing some pendulum swinging in other contexts today.
Exactly.
And I think your message is that you do get through it. It's just its persistence and being open-minded, and and I think that keeping your network close to you. So that's great. Before we move on, we actually have a couple questions that come in that we'd like to answer. So. I'd like to start with people looking for jobs during this time. That's a really, really good question, and I think there's two different ways that we could start to talk about this question. It comes from Kayla. So Kayla, thank you for asking this question to all of us. I will start by saying this is also going to be a plug for everyone here on this in this meeting, in this event. Should make sure that you go to USC Career Services website. It's careers.usc.edu. And as a student, go ahead and sign up for the Trojan Network. That is the official portal. That's the official portal where, first of all, you could get matched with an alum. If you have questions for any alum, for example, like from either David or Heather or Mark, or alums just like them, we literally have thousands of alums who are ready to help you, who will answer questions you have, questions you might have after today, as you're looking to, network and look for, next great opportunities. The Trojan Network is crucial. Also, we do have a jobs board at USC. It's called Connect SC. Connect SC is also offered through the Career Center. So when you talk about the two platforms, the Trojan Network is specifically to, keep in touch and get matched with alums for perhaps, whether you want like some advice or some mentorship, that's Trojan Network. Connect SC is frankly a job board. So I'm going to answer the question that way. But I'd also like to ask our panelists then to talk about, some advice for looking for jobs during this time. If anyone can impart some wisdom. David or Mark, do you want to take that?
Sure,
David.
I can go. Yeah, so to build off of what Patrick said, I mean, we've kind of mentioned this a couple times, but it's really just sort of leveraging your network and the connections and people you've met throughout your years at USC, whether it's been, 2 or 3, 4 years, whatever it may be. And a great way to also do that is through LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn, great. If you don't, then I highly encourage you to create one. Especially now during this period of time that we're experiencing, I see people posting all the time, like people who may have never posted LinkedIn posts or statuses before. I'm looking for a job, or I've just been laid off. Does anyone have any resources or any connections with people to help me? And, I'm seeing other people like respond to them and comment and say, hey, send me an email, or, oh yeah, I know someone, I'll message you. And that's been a great tool. And also, sort of as you're building your profile and then revamping it, whatever it may be, don't be afraid to reach out to people who aren't your connections. I'll see people all the time who are second or third, level connections on LinkedIn. And sometimes people will reach out to me because they'll say, hey, David, I saw that you did this while you're at USC, or I see you're doing this in your job now. Like, can we set up a time to like chat? I'd love to like speak with you and meet with you. And of course, I always say, yeah, of course, let's set up a time. Or like on the reverse end of things, I will, see someone like, oh, they're like an executive director in like a government relations department or community relations, which is like my field or what I really enjoy doing. And they're, they've moved up the ladder. I'd love to like get to know them. Oh, and they went to USC. Then I'll reach out to them and send them a message and say, hey, my name is David Moreno. I'll give them my background, graduated from USC and in this field, currently doing this. I saw you're an executive director for Fox or whatever it may be for government relations. You have time to like set up a time to like chat, like either in person, via email or phone, whatever is most convenient for you. And people they're always willing to help, more so now during this difficult period of time. So definitely, utilize LinkedIn, keep in contact with your professors. You have access to everyone, especially digitally. So definitely make use of all of that.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I think between LinkedIn and the Trojan Network, you can't lose. What's interesting, David, you did bring this up, and I'm noticing it too. LinkedIn tends to sometimes be passive. Like everyone goes on and puts their stuff and then nothing happens. But I think because we're in this different environment right now, there's a different mentality and approach to it, which I think is great. But the good thing about the Trojan Network is that the alumni who are in the Trojan Network have gone in there specifically because they're raising their hand to help you. Whereas alumni who go on LinkedIn, they might be going on just because they want to, as we all should, have a brand, as Heather talked about, and have something out there. But I think that it's important to leverage all the different resources that are available to you. Wanted to also now address a couple other questions which have come into the Zoom chat. How do you stay in touch with classmates when you reside in another state? And I think there's many ways we could answer this, but I'd like to ask our panel from just how have you done it? Because I would imagine, we have somebody who graduated in the 80s, someone who finished her master's in the early 2000s, and then someone who graduated just a few years ago. I'm assuming you have Trojan friends, fellow Trojans, classmates, alumni in other cities and other states. So how do you stay in touch with them? Mark, why don't we start with you?
Okay, it's through email, phone, but what's nice about the events or the Trojan Family is that, for instance, I just had my 35th reunion last year, and I was fortunate enough to be on the panel or on the committee, but it was a great way to reach out to people that I hadn't seen in years or hadn't even talked to and get together and just catch up on old times while we were on campus. And so that provided a great location. So you can use events on campus or groups that you're already networking with on campus, whether they're affinity groups, and reaching out to other people that way, and maintain contact, and just after that, stay in contact.
Great. David, what about you?
Yeah, so, like Patrick mentioned earlier, I'm younger, so obviously I rely on social media, texting and everything, and whatnot. So, once I graduated, like probably half or more of my friends, they all moved to other big cities. A big trend tends to be, people don't stay in LA. A lot of times they go to San Francisco or Seattle or DC, New York, whatever it may be. So, sort of setting up FaceTime chats or, times when we're going to video chat, whatever it may be, because, everyone's at different, times in their careers. Everyone has different busy schedules. So really kind of putting aside the time and scheduling all of those chats to stay connected with my friends. And then, staying connected with USC as well. I think, right now, just given everything that's going on and everything being virtual and digital, I think moving forward, you'll also probably see more opportunities to stay connected with USC virtually. As you know, there's been a lot of Zoom events and whatnot going on. So that's going to be another great way for people to stay connected to the university and to one another. Whenever I see like a great virtual event that's been coming on recently, I'll send it to my friends who are living in other states or other cities, and then we'll all jump on together. We'll chat about it in like our texting threads, whatever it may be. But yeah, everything's sort of just kind of relying on like that digital connection, and it helps and it works.
I want to add to that, David. Thank you. There are so many different ways to stay connected, and virtually more than ever now, because we have another question here, which thank you that you just tossed me a meatball there. I'm going to take a swing at that one. And it also goes right along with the question that Nicole Renna asked about being involved with each of your own local alumni associations. The fact is that we have alumni communities all over the country, all over the world. David had mentioned a few big cities in the US, whether it's Bay Area, the New York metro area, maybe Dallas, Atlanta, you name it. We have substantial alumni communities. And when I say substantial, I mean alumni communities literally in the thousands. So if you think about it, we have 428,000 alumni around the world. Now, that number is going to jump to about 438,000 in a couple of weeks when you all have your degrees conferred. It's very exciting for us. Half of our alums live in LA and Orange County. If you combine LA and Orange County, that would account for half the alumni base. The other half of the base live all over the place. We have about 30,000 alumni up in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have about 8,000 alumni in the New York metro area. 6,000 alumni in Washington, D.C. metro area, and also 6,000 alums in Seattle. Big communities. The state of Texas has 10,000 alumni. It's kind of split between Dallas, Houston, and Austin. My point is that there's ways to stay connected everywhere. And as we're continuing to evolve our alumni engagement strategy in the whole exciting digital world, your best way to stay connected to the Trojan family and to find Trojans in your region, two ways. Number one, the online community portal called Fight Online that we talked about, which you will get an invitation to register for as soon as you graduate. And number two, go to our website. When you go to the alumni.usc.edu, you go under communities and under regional, and there's a map with pin spots, and you can find contact information for alumni leaders in those regions. It's that simple. And it's actually going to change a lot in the next couple months to make it even more simple for you to connect with fellow Trojans. And then as mentioned already from Mark and David, and there's events everywhere. I mean, Heather had a great interaction with USC in New York. I mean, it's amazing. Sometimes I'll run into alums when I'm on the road, and it's like, and I find out that they work on campus. I'm like, wait, I'm here in Shanghai and I'm meeting you for the first time when you work in 2 buildings down from me on Truesdale. It's just kind of interesting. The Trojan family literally is everywhere. And so we want you to make sure you take advantage of those resources. I do want to answer one other quick question, and then I want to go back to our panel. But someone asked, does it cost money to join the Alumni Association? No. You've paid enough tuition. You have other financial obligations. One day when you're rich and famous and you're doing all kinds of great things to change the world and solve problems out there and make great discoveries and be the best innovator, we would love for you to contribute to USC, because that's one of the major ways USC has been great, is from the support of our alumni. But you do not have to pay to be a member of the association. That membership is automatic. I'd now like to go back to our panel and ask them a question about pivoting. And Mark, you talked about pivoting. You had this great opportunity, this kind of easy road to just go in the family business, which you're doing now, but you made a bold move. You decided, I think I'm going to try something different. Talk about that experience about pivoting and then pivoting back to eventually coming into the family business.
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I'd been working for the family business since I was 14. And so I was ready to, not that it was super easy, and my dad was probably my toughest boss when I look back, but I think there's a certain comfort level that you have when you're in a family business, especially for a long period of time. And so, going through USC, getting my degree in business, I really wanted to challenge myself and see what I could do on my own. And so I figured it was time, and I was young enough to continue to, go out and try and find something meaningful that I could feel that I could be challenged and really test myself. And so went out, ended up getting a job as a sales manager in a large retail chain store, department store setup, and eventually worked my way through into the corporate buying offices there. And you look back and I think, well, what did I learn and what was the experience like? I think I learned that not to be afraid to take on the challenges, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself, and to just be strong and be firm in your conviction about yourself and what you have to offer. There was a time after a few years where I decided to go back. I had gotten older and gained a lot of outside experience, but there was a legacy there for me. And it was a business that was started by my grandfather in 1946. And so I think that legacy was what drew me back to the business where I'm at today.
Excellent. Heather, you want to talk about a pivot? Because it sounds like you had to make some interesting choices too. I guess the longer we're around, the more choices there are to have to make.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've definitely moved across different industries in my career. I think one thing that is useful, and Patrick, I was thinking about your question around finding jobs in this moment as well, because you may have to pivot in terms of, as we talked about earlier, the industry you think you might be working in or the type of role that you're in. And just a couple things on that. I see Roderick here on camera, who I have the great privilege of working with. Roderick works at the Downtown Women's Center on Skid Row, and I have the honor of serving as the board president for that organization. And I see so many people who come to volunteer with DWC, and they join a committee, like boards, within most organizations, nonprofit organizations, there are committees, whether it's communication, event management, fundraising, you name it. That is a wonderful way to help you make a pivot. So let's just say that you're missing a skill set. Nonprofit organizations are always looking for volunteers to help out, and they're not as concerned, do you have all of this perfectly lined up experience. They're willing to give you that sort of kind of on the job training, and are incredibly grateful for it. So I would encourage you to look for those opportunities, even if you don't have a job lined up right away, or even if you do, you're going to grow personally, and you're giving so much to organizations in Los Angeles and all over the planet that really use your support, especially in this moment right now. So, and of course, also being involved with these alumni organizations, and I have the honor of serving on the board of governors and also the Center for Public Relations at USC. I'm involved with the Trojan Society for Women. I mean, there is no shortage of opportunity to get involved, and you learn by volunteering with those groups as well, and that also helps you with these pivots that are inevitable in life. So hopefully that helps.
I think you answered that. Thank you, Heather. You answered about 4 questions there, because I was going to also ask. I know the pivot is great, but you really like segued into what we also want to talk about today is, and pardon the expression, everybody, but kind of like the gateway drug. Like, what was that one experience you had with volunteering for USC that got you so deeply involved to where you are today? I mean, David's on our Young Alumni Council, Heather's on our Board of Governors, Mark is on the Alumni Board of Governors, and there's so many ways to be involved. And one of the questions that's been asked in the Zoom group chat is, are each of you members of different alumni associations? So I'd love to talk about, and Mark, you talked about athletics. Obviously we're a very proud and, spirited institution. So I'd like each of you to talk about how you got so deeply involved. Like, what was that kind of foray into what you're doing today as a volunteer for USC? So why don't we, David, let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so, in high school, I sort of started my volunteer service. Like, everyone tells you, like, oh, you build up a good resume of like extracurriculars and volunteering for your college application, whether it's like NHS or CSF, those other like sort of California or national like societies. So naturally, once I got to USC, I sort of thought the same thing, like, all right, like I'm on campus, USC has all these great volunteer opportunities. What can I take advantage of? And one of them that I did my last 2 years as a junior and senior was, I mentioned it earlier, I was a Dornsife student ambassador. So that was a great and awesome experience because we get to do a variety of things. One, we're sort of, we volunteer and staff a lot of the USC events, Discover and Explore USC, if any of you have partaken in those, designed to, one, convince students to to consider USC and to apply, and then once they're in, to attend. And so that was always sort of like a really great experience for me, because I got to speak to students and parents and got to like help get them excited about the university and share my personal experiences and tell them about all the great things USC had to offer, all the great things USC was doing for me. And I, a lot of times I would stay connected to those students and parents throughout their application process. And I'd always give them my email, say reach out at any time. So naturally, I just sort of love that volunteer service, and also, being in student government, always fostering that sort of leadership development and service to the university. So, one of the things that had kind of, especially in student government, that people would always mention is people would always say, like what's like naturally the next volunteer step, like once you graduate, like what's like, especially for young alumni. And you would always see like the leaders of student government or all these other student organizations kind of just going towards the Young Alumni Council as like kind of like a first step and like a good introduction to the Alumni Association, because they're constant, and we are constantly putting on programs, events, putting out resources geared towards young alumni. So then that's when I decided to start attending the events. I loved it so much, I wanted to get more involved, so I applied to join the board. So my first year, last year on the board, I was a director of regional representatives, sort of helping our young alumni in different cities and regions stay connected to the university, to the Alumni Association. And then this year, I was a director of professional development events, sort of doing the work that's in the name of the title. And then I'm fortunate enough to now be the president-elect for this upcoming year. So that's going to be another great and exciting role, staying connected. And so I really enjoyed that. And so from, as I've been enjoying my young alumni experience, I thought to myself last year, like, what, I really want to now sort of get more connected to my specific college, Dornsife. So then I reached out to the Dornsife Director of Alumni Relations, named Sarah Sturm, emailed her, introduced her, she introduced myself to her. And then we actually like sat down for a coffee chat and then in the village, talked about my experiences. She talked about like, opportunities that were available that she was sort of setting up. And then that naturally just kind of became another great opportunity, in that this was the first inaugural year for the Dornsife Alumni Advisory Council. Dornsife didn't have one, sort of like what Marshall has and other colleges and the university have. So I was the inaugural member of that with 9 other individuals. And that's sort of has become another great Dornsife experience for me.
So it's great. And David, my goodness, you just graduated a few years ago and you're so involved. And I hope, you're still, you still have a day job. I know you do. I want to ask this, and Robbie Spencer, thank you for this. Robbie Spencer, one of our attendees today, is asking a great question. So Mark, get ready to answer this. How do you have time to do all this? Robbie, why don't you ask? Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and congratulations, fellow grads. So, Mark, one thing I keep hearing from you is bored of this, bored of that. How do you get on all of these boards? Does it start with what you guys were saying in regards to just starting at more of a ground level of volunteering, or like, I want to make that impact? How can I be like you guys?
That's a great question, Robbie. Thank you for asking that. And I think you're right. I think the place to start is at the ground level and get involved and get a lot of experience, and then just keep moving up to different boards and widening that experience that you have. And then that's going to help you to access other opportunities and to join other boards as well. For me, I think when you love doing something, volunteering for me at SC, I love it, being able to give back. You make the time, and I think that it's fun and it's enjoyable, and it's a very positive and enriching experience. For me, the pivotal point for me was when I met Dr. Roger Rossier and his wife Barbara, and they got me involved in the Orange County Trojan Club, and I got to work with them on some things, exposed to his style of leadership, and it was really inspiring to me. And that's really the point when I thought I want to get more involved, like where you're at right now, and local clubs on campus, affinity groups and programs, and attend events. I think that's a great way to get started.
Well, I have to say, I came in as a graduate student. Undergrad was at UCLA. But I am like Heather in that I And then on top of it, my program was an online program. So I don't feel as connected to campus. I can count on one hand how many times I've been to campus, and it's been a magical experience every time I've gone, but I don't feel that physical connection to the campus. So how do you overcome that?
Robbie, unfortunately, none of us has felt a physical connection to campus, so I think we call it. But that's a really good question. It's like, so I guess, you know, another thing you're asking, and I'd like for all three panelists to talk about this, what you get involved in at USC as an alum doesn't necessarily have to be what you were involved with at USC as a student. So I think you're talking about people like David obviously had a very rich experience in Dornsife, being super involved. But a lot of the stuff that, like Mark, you're a wonderful Trojan, but you weren't unless we don't know, you weren't a world-class athlete, but you're very involved in athletics. So let's talk for a minute about that. Like, just because maybe, and Robbie, going back to your question, you're not on campus, how do you still make that connection and, you know, forge that kind of new reality for yourself? So who would like to take that one, Heather or David?
I'm happy to jump in. You know, much like you, Robbie, I didn't have that kind of on-campus experience in the same way that undergrads do, and a lot of my connections have actually been very much off campus. There's, you know, USC is so much, the alumni is so committed to giving back, to making a difference in communities. There's always opportunities to volunteer, to get involved in networking events. I mean, fun things like wine tasting. That's how, you know, I first started getting involved with the alumni group. There was a group that was interested in wine tasting. You know, there's things that can be just fun and community building. And then there are other things that, you know, like volunteering and to speak on campus, or now I think as we see so much more moving to online, opportunities to participate in that way too. I think, you know, there's the physical piece, of course, of the campus, but so much of what my experience has been is more around the family and the connections, and just being able to, even within my own organization at AECOM, there's a group of people who, you know, we all graduated from USC, and you have that sense of community that's created there. So I think you could pretty much pick any passion that you have and find a group of Trojans to connect with. It's a wonderful way to open doors. You know, there's, and I think David mentioned that earlier, when you reach out to people and you find, you know, that USC connection can really spark a conversation and give you an opportunity to have a discussion with someone, or coffee with someone that you might not have otherwise been able to access, because you have, you know, the power of that Trojan network behind you. So don't be afraid to use that as a way to, you know, build bridges and connect with people. I would just say though, because I do get a lot of requests for coffee, or, you know, interest in connecting with alumni. And I think just be careful about asking it in a way that's going to be value add to both the person that you're looking to sit down with and to you. So, you know, a lot of requests that I get will say, oh, well, you know, I want to sit down with you and, you know, get some advice from you about, you know, my career. And that's kind of, you know, if you can just be a bit more specific to say, oh, Heather, I noticed that you have expertise in this area, and here's a problem that I'm looking to get some help with. Can I have 30 minutes of your time or 15 minutes of your time to do a Zoom chat and pick your brain on this? I guarantee you the majority of Trojans will say yes. I mean, they really will. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't feel like we're all stronger together. We want to help each other. And that's what's so unique and so amazing about this community that you're part of for life now. So I would encourage you to really do that.
Excellent. Anybody else want to take that?
Sure, I'll add to it.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so sort of like touching on a lot of the great points that Heather was making, you know, and how Patrick said earlier, like, you don't necessarily need to, you know, volunteer or get involved for something that may be directly related to what you do. Or like, you know, me, like I drink the Dornsife juice, and I still am to this day, and that's great. But, you know, like, you know, as time kind of goes by, sometimes I'm always thinking like, well, like, what else could I like get involved in? What other sort of organization could I like, you know, sort of join or volunteer for that maybe necessarily isn't what I do or what like I know anything of. You know, like the USC Alumni Association has a wide range of different groups, like whether they're sort of like culturally based, like the Latino Alumni Association, Black Alumni Association, etc., or more sort of like issues based, like the Entrepreneurs Network, the Alumni Real Estate Network. Like, you know, like I've thought about like, you know, real estate, and I always think to myself, like, I have like no background in real estate. Like, I don't know how any of that works, like transactions, whatever it is, but there's like an Alumni Real Estate Network. And so, you know, I reached out one time and said like, hey, can I get more information on your events? I'd love to just sort of be added to your mailing list. I'll always like look up for the president or whoever it may be. And, you know, I'll say, if you're the person to help me with this, great. If not, could you connect me to whoever else on your board or in your organization may be able to help me with that? And again, everyone's always willing to connect you. But also, you know, like sort of Heather was touching upon earlier, when you're like reaching out to people, yeah, you sort of want to be specific and also just cognizant of that person's time, because, you know, especially, you know, the more senior person you reach out to, the more busy they're probably going to be. But also just sort of making sure that you offer like a variety of different options for them being able to speak to you, because sometimes you may reach out and say like, oh, can we like sit down and chat? But maybe right now they're just like in a very busy season and they don't really have time to like drive somewhere and meet with you in person. So you could say, you know, can we either like chat in person, phone call, video call, whatever it may be, like whatever's best for your schedule. And then that just sort of like, you know, makes it easier for them, and their schedule sort of relieves that pressure and, you know, that from their shoulders. So that's always sort of like a great way to go about that. And again, people, they're always willing to help. You know, it's a great feeling to be able to help others. You know, something that one of my mentors, he's a professor at Danchner. He's the former director of the Underinstitute of Politics. He was the one who really helped, you know, guide me when I graduated and when I was a student, when I was just sort of like coming into his office and being like, I love everything. I'm like political science. I love like immigration reform. I love like economic development, nonprofits. Like, I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? So he was just like, you know, relax, calm down. It's not necessarily a matter. Like, you don't need to necessarily say like, I need to know what I want to do right now. Like, you can do all of those things that you want to do in life. It's just a matter of which opportunities present themselves to you first, you know? And also just another great piece of advice that I had received when I was like sort of going through those different like, you know, chats with people that he was connecting me with, and that I still like, whenever anyone asks me like, what's the one piece of advice you would give like a graduating senior, I always say it's to relieve yourself from the pressure of needing to have a plan, and needing to have everything like planned out for your life. Like if you have a plan and it works out for you, then great, like that's awesome. But sometimes like for me, like I had an image or a plan of what I wanted to do after graduation, and it didn't like, you know, it didn't happen. Then you may start like sort of getting freaked out or discouraged. You know, it's kind of like going back to what my mentor said. It's like, you're going to have the opportunity to do what you want to do, you know, at various points in your life. Just things might not be so linear, and they may just sort of pop up as they go along. But just sort of, you know, take the opportunities as they come. You know, volunteer, do whatever it is, and you may end up, you know, surprising yourself and end up in another field with a job that you didn't think you were going to love or be doing, but that's, you know, working out for you. Like me, I didn't think I was going to be doing communications or PR. It's not as political as I wanted it to be initially, but it's like a great field, and I'm happy with where I am with that.
Excellent. Well, you know, you said something, David, that's pretty interesting when you said, you know, the higher up, the higher the level the person you're pursuing, the busier they are, which is true. But I also, the cool thing is that the higher level you're pursuing, the more likely they are to be a Trojan. So we have Trojans in lots of high places. So, you know, obviously that's very sage advice, and, you know, use your time wisely. Listen, we are just coming up on the hour, so we're going to do a little lightning round here. Each of our panelists is going to have a final parting thought. They could take 15 seconds, maybe 20 if you're lucky. But let's go ahead and, Mark, let's start with you. A final thought that you'd like to impart to our graduating class of 2020.
First of all, congratulations. Don't ever give up. Remain passionate. Create your own opportunities. Work hard, but have fun, because life is all about balance. And then thank you for choosing USC and helping to make it such a special place that it is. I wish you all the best, and fight on.
Thank you, Mark. Heather, you're next.
Great. Well, again, congratulations. I hope to stay connected with many of you. And I would just encourage you, as you look to, you know, land your next opportunity, that don't be concerned in making sure you check every box on what that potential employer is looking for. Consider the job description that you see, kind of the start of a conversation. no employer ever expects you to check off every box. And so much of what leads someone to hire you is a connection that you might have had, someone who opened a door for you, the opportunity to sit down with someone, and the energy that you bring to the table. Back to that personal brand piece, I think it can be very discouraging when you look at all these job descriptions and go, gosh, I don't have all of those things in my background, or I didn't study that. Just be open as you look to explore opportunities ahead, because there's a lot out there, a lot of need out there, and you all can bring so much to the table. And so I wish you all the best of luck, and fight on.
Thank you, Heather. And to our most recent grad, David Moreno. David, any final thought from you, sir?
Yeah, congratulations, everyone. But the main thing I would say is definitely have confidence in yourself and your ability to be great and do great things. Obviously, we all went to USC at one point or another. So when we were applying, USC obviously saw something special in each of us and each of you. You have a great set of skills and talents, and you only naturally hone those over these last few years with your education. So definitely believe in yourself and your ability to do great things, because everything's gonna work out for you.
Excellent. Well, on that note, on behalf of 428,000 and growing very soon alumni across the world, the USC Alumni Association, and our beloved University of Southern California, class of 2020, congratulations. We are here for you. The university, as you know, is working on a plan to have an in-person commencement for you when it is safe to do so. So please participate in your virtual commencement on May 15th. You'll be getting all kinds of information. And then please, we really hope that we see you as an alum right away, whether we can do it virtually, whatever city we're in, whether we're back on campus. And then we'll also hope that you will come back and celebrate your richly deserved commencement when it is safe and appropriate to do so. Good luck on finals, good luck on your papers, your dissertations, your defenses, your theses, anything that you're doing to get that USC degree in hand. And always, fight on. Okay, we can unmute we're all in a private room now, I think. Are we?
I don't know.
We're not.
I don't think so.
Okay,
So everyone's slowly jumping up.
How do we get off of this thing?
I think we have to move to a separate room.